the town of Blackridge, Virginia, sat quietly in the folds of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the kind of place where church bells and porch lights marked the rhythm of life. People knew their neighbors, and nothing strange ever stayed hidden for long, until a man called Father Malachi Ward appeared. No one remembered the day he arrived, only that he seemed to already belong. His voice carried an authority that silenced arguments, and his words dripped with the kind of conviction that made ordinary people feel chosen. He said he'd come prepare the world for a purification, a divine cleansing before the end of days. At first, Ward was welcomed. He spoke at small town halls, local churches, even school auditoriums. He was polite, calm, articulate, exactly the kind of preacher the faithful trusted. But behind his soft-spoken sermons was a message that unsettled some listeners. He talked about sacrifice, about shedding one's worldly skin to reveal a purer self. He promised that pain could be transcended if followers devoted themselves completely to the blood of renewal. His teachings blended scripture, mysticism, and something older, something no one could quite identify. By 1982, a small following had begun to form. Young people from nearby colleges, single mothers searching for purpose, veterans who felt forgotten, all drawn to the promise of belonging. They called themselves the Church of Blood, though Ward claimed the name came from an ancient prophecy rather than violence. Their meetings began in borrowed barns, candlelit gatherings that grew into hundreds of attendees. Each sermon ended the same way, with the congregation chanting a single line in unison, "Through the blood, we are made whole." The town dismissed it as eccentric religion, but those inside spoke of a new family. They sold their homes, donated life savings, and severed ties with relatives who questioned their faith. When asked where the money went, Ward smiled and said it was the construction of the sanctuary, a holy retreat deep in the forest where faithful would one day live free from corruption. Land deeds later uncovered by federal investigators showed he purchased over 200 acres of secluded woodland under fake corporations and shell names. In 1984, the first cracks appeared. Two former members, Mark Teller and Dana Frost, tried to leave the church after complaining about night vigils and initiation rites that involved isolation and silence for days. They vanished before they could speak to police. Locals remember the night they disappeared. Bonfires glowing red against a tree lean and chants echoing until dawn. When neighbors asked questions, members insisted it was a baptismal celebration. No missing person reports were filed. The church discouraged contact with outsiders. A young reporter from the Blackridge Herald, Ellen Kramer, began digging. Her early articles painted Ward as a manipulative leader exploiting spiritual hunger for power and money. Then one evening, she phoned her editor, saying she had obtained proof of something bigger. She never made it to the meeting. Her car was found abandoned off Route 19, doors locked, keys still in the ignition. Police called it a disappearance. The church called it divine judgment. By now, whispers had spread beyond Virginia. Families from neighboring states claimed their children had joined the church and stopped returning calls. Some said they received letters written in identical handwriting, signed only with a red wax seal, a cross above a drop of blood. The FBI took interest when an interstate financial network began emerging. Donations wired through fake charities, property trades between shell groups, and missing individuals who all attended Ward's revivals at some point. Inside Blackridge, fear became routine. Residents claimed unmarked vans patrolled the outskirts at night. Dogs barked at figures standing near mailboxes, watching. Those who mocked the church found red paint splashed across their doors by morning. The local sheriff called it teenage vandalism. The townspeople called it a warning. Despite everything, Ward's presence grew. He started appearing on late-night radio programs under different aliases, preaching about America's moral decay. His voice, deep and measured, had a hypnotic rhythm. He promised salvation for those who would reject the modern world and embrace the ancient covenant of blood. Callers phoned in, asking how to join. Within a year, hundreds more arrived in Blackridge, seeking the man who claimed to speak for God. Then came the Gathering of the Cleanse, an event that changed everything. Flyers appeared overnight across 3 states, inviting the faithful to the grand opening of the sanctuary. The meeting was held in the forest compound. No press, no police, no outsiders allowed. Locals said that for 3 nights, strange lights flickered through the trees. Smoke rose above the valley, and rhythmic chanting carried on the wind. When it ended, the Church of Blood shut its gates to the world. No one in town saw Ward for months afterward, but his voice continued to echo through mail cassette tapes sent to followers across the country. Each tape opened with the same phrase: "If you hear this, you have been chosen." It was around this time that the FBI's Behavioral Science Division quietly took note. Missing person cases now stretched from Virginia to Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Each had one thing in common. The victim's last known contact was someone affiliated with the Church of Blood. The Bureau began compiling files, interviewing survivors, and charting connections that pointed to a single man orchestrating everything from behind closed doors. But by the time investigators arrived in Black Ridge, the sanctuary was empty. The building stripped bare, walls covered with painted symbols, crosses intertwined with serpents, Latin verses scrawled in crimson pigment. It was as if the entire congregation had vanished overnight, leaving behind nothing but echoes and a single phrase carved into the chapel altar: "Through the blood, we are made whole." That was when the government realized this wasn't just a fringe cult. It was a network, and someone was helping it stay invisible. By 1991, the Church of Blood had evolved from a local mystery into a national enigma. Hundreds were missing. Bank transfers linked to offshore accounts moved in precise monthly patterns, suggesting an organized network rather than chaos. The FBI, under pressure from multiple states, officially launched Operation Sanctuary, a classified investigation designed to expose and dismantle the cult from within. Publicly, it didn't exist, but in the Bureau's inner circles, it became one of the most obsessive manhunts of the decade. At the center of the operation was Special Agent Jonathan Cross, a man known for patience and for his unnerving ability to disappear into any role. He had previously infiltrated white-collar crime rings, biker gangs, and extremist groups. But nothing could have prepared him for the Church of Blood. His mission: to pose as a drifter searching for purpose, to gain Father Malachi Ward's trust, and uncover the truth about what went on inside the sanctuary before it was abandoned. Cross spent weeks studying Ward's tapes and transcripts. He noticed something others had missed. The sermons weren't random. Each contained fragments of an encoded pattern. When played in a specific order, the recordings formed a continuous manifesto called the Book of Purification. It detailed a vision of America collapsing into sin and the faithful chosen to survive through the covenant of sacrifice. Ward described the coming era as a renewal, when only those cleansed through obedience and blood would ascend. The text wasn't theology. It was indoctrination disguised as prophecy. In the spring of 1992, Cross traveled to Tupelo, Mississippi, where reports suggested the church had resurfaced under a new name, the Renewal Movement. He joined an open-air revival meeting held at midnight behind an abandoned textile mill. What he found defied logic. Dozens of people stood in a circle, silent, heads bowed. At the center, a man in crimson robes recited Ward's words verbatim, though Ward himself was nowhere in sight. Cross introduced himself as a wanderer seeking redemption. Within a week, he was accepted into the fold. He was given a new name, Brother Isaac. Members referred to each other only by biblical titles. Communication with outsiders was forbidden. Meals were communal, speech limited, and lights extinguished at sunset. Every night at exactly 12:13 a.m., a bell rang 3 times, summoning the congregation for the hour of reflection. They would kneel before an altar marked with the cross and drop symbol, repeating the same vow: "Through the blood, we are made whole." Cross's hidden microphone captured everything. In his reports, he described the methods Ward's inner circle used to control followers: deprivation, isolation, and relentless repetition. Doubt was labeled weakness. Sleep was restricted to induce emotional collapse. The cult called it the breaking. Only after a member broke completely were they deemed reborn. Those who resisted disappeared. The others were told they had been called away. After several months, Cross was invited to the next level, the Sanctuary of the Chosen. It was a small compound deep in the Mississippi woods, surrounded by barbed wire and guarded by watchmen. Inside stood a single stone building without windows. The walls were covered with inscriptions, a mix of scripture and indecipherable symbols. Cross wrote that the atmosphere felt both military and religious, like a monastery built for obedience rather than worship. He noticed a small underground hatch sealed with iron locks. When he asked what lay below, his guide smiled and said, "That is where we are made clean." The deeper he went, the more he realized how extensive the operation had become. The church wasn't just one group. It was a web. Members held jobs in hospitals, police departments, and government offices. Donations flowed through fake charities. Children were raised inside the system, homeschooled and taught that the outside world was dying. Cross's notes revealed that even the FBI's own investigation had been compromised. Someone inside was leaking information. Each time a raid was planned, the cult vanished days before. Then came the tape. In October 1992, the Bureau's Virginia field office received a small brown envelope sealed with the Blood Cross emblem. Inside was a VHS cassette labeled Testimony of Faith. The footage showed Father Malachi Ward standing in candlelight, flanked by robed followers. His eyes were calm, his voice steady. "You send your men into our garden," he said, "but faith cannot be infiltrated. Faith is born in the heart, and the heart cannot be wiretapped." It was clear he knew about Cross. The operation went silent. Fearing exposure, the Bureau pulled Cross out, but he refused. He claimed to be close to uncovering the location of the true sanctuary. For 3 more weeks, his transmissions continued, distorted, tense, describing preparation for something called the Ascension. Then, one night, his signal stopped. A raid was launched the next morning. Agents stormed the compound, but found it abandoned. Fresh footprints, food still warm, fires still burning. In the underground chamber, they discovered a single chair, chains bolted to the floor, and a Bible open to the book of Revelation. On the wall above it, scrawled in red paint, were 4 words: "Brother Isaac is reborn." Cross was never seen again. The Bureau denied the operation publicly, sealing all files under national security. Yet, whispers spread within law enforcement about what had been found. Evidence that the Church of Blood was far larger than anyone had imagined, perhaps spanning decades, perhaps generations. Ward, once believed dead, was rumored to be operating under new identities. Followers claimed he could not die, that he had transcended flesh through the covenant. For the FBI, it was a failure wrapped in silence. But for the cult, it was proof of prophecy, that even the government could not destroy what was divinely ordained. Behind closed doors, the Bureau began one final plan, a coordinated strike across multiple states, designed to end the church once and for all. The operation's name was changed to Crimson Light. What they didn't know was that the cult was already watching them. Winter 1996. The FBI's secret task force, now renamed Operation Crimson Light, had spent years chasing ghosts. Every lead ended in ashes. Every compound raided was empty. It was as if the Church of Blood evaporated into thin air whenever law enforcement drew close. Files were piling up faster than answers. Dozens of agents had rotated off the case, calling it cursed. But one night, a message arrived that changed everything. A woman walked into a small police station in Little Rock, Arkansas, trembling barefoot and bleeding from her wrists. She called herself Sarah Dalton and said she had escaped the sanctuary. Her voice cracked as she spoke about Father Malachi Ward, about rebirth through blood, and about the followers who would rather die than betray him. She carried a tattered leather notebook, its pages covered with strange symbols, names, and dates. Inside were bank account numbers, meeting locations, and a meticulous list of people marked cleansed. Every one of them corresponded to a missing person. Dalton told investigators that Ward was alive, living under a new alias, Elias Crow, and that it established multiple cells across the South and Midwest. The sanctuary wasn't a single compound anymore. It was a network of safe houses hidden in plain sight. She had been one of his chosen, indoctrinated since her teens, forced into rituals that blurred the line between worship and control. It wasn't until she witnessed the death of another member during a failed ascension that she fled into the night, carrying the ledger as proof. Her testimony reignited the entire operation. Within days, the FBI launched simultaneous raids across Tennessee, Kentucky, and Ohio. They uncovered storage lockers filled with robes, videotapes, cash, and letters sealed with a familiar blood-red emblem. But the most chilling discovery came from a steel mill outside Youngstown, Ohio, an abandoned facility transformed into an underground meeting hall. Inside, agents found chairs arranged in perfect concentric circles, a podium in the center, and an altar carved from stone. The walls were painted black and covered in scripture written in crimson pigment, the words repeated endlessly. Through the blood, we are made whole. In a corner of the chamber, a small door led to a basement filled with file cabinets. Inside were thousands of documents, financial ledgers, photographs, and ID cards. Many of the faces matched missing person cases dating back decades. Some files bore government seals, suggesting that members with inside access had been quietly protecting the church for years. It was the largest domestic cult operation ever uncovered on U.S. soil. Yet still, there was no sign of Father Ward. Then, on February 3rd, 1996, an anonymous tip came into the Bureau's Washington field office. The voice on the phone was calm, male, and familiar. "He's waiting for you," it said. "He wants you to see the truth." The call traced back to an abandoned coal facility in Athens County, Ohio. Agents were hesitant. It felt like a trap, but they went anyway. What they found inside would become legend among investigators. The facility was dark except for a single chamber illuminated by candles. There, standing at the base of a staircase, was Father Malachi Ward himself, older, thinner, but unmistakable. He offered no resistance. When agents ordered him to ground, he smiled faintly and said, "Faith cannot be handcuffed." The followers surrounding him dropped to their knees, chanting softly as he was taken away. The scene was captured on the agents' helmet cameras, a surreal moment of calm after nearly 15 years of terror. The arrest was hailed as the end of America's most dangerous cult. Ward was charged with conspiracy, fraud, unlawful confinement, and obstruction of justice. But when the trial began, it became clear how deep his influence ran. Witnesses vanished. Evidence disappeared. Jurors received anonymous letters quoting scripture. Prosecutors fought to keep the proceedings from turning into a spectacle. Ward remained silent throughout, staring at the courtroom ceiling as if listening to something no one else could hear. When asked if he had any final statement before sentencing, he leaned forward, smiled, and said, "The blood remembers." He was sentenced to life in federal custody. 3 years later, in 1999, Ward was found dead in his cell at a secure facility in Colorado. Official reports listed heart failure, but guards claimed strange things: lights flickering, whispers in the ventilation system, symbols scratched into concrete walls overnight. One officer resigned after finding a red wax seal placed neatly on his locker door. The prison never commented. The FBI sealed the remaining case files, citing ongoing security interests. Only a few pages were ever released to the public under the Freedom of Information Act, heavily redacted, filled with black bars and missing dates. But those who worked the investigation knew the truth. The Church of Blood hadn't died. It had simply changed shape. In the years that followed, sightings of the cult's symbol appeared across abandoned buildings and online forums. A group calling itself a Covenant of Renewal began recruiting through encrypted chat rooms, quoting Ward's sermons word for word. Some of the usernames matched names from the old ledger. Others were new, young, devoted, and convinced that the Father would one day rise again. Sarah Dalton, the whistleblower, vanished from witness protection in 2002. Her last recorded message to federal handlers was a handwritten note that read, "They found me. The circle is never broken." Today, the story of the Church of Blood remains one of the most chilling and unresolved chapters in modern American history. For every official record closed, another rumor opens: a sighting, a tape, a strange gathering in the woods. Former investigators describe hearing Ward's sermons re-uploaded online, his voice restored and digitally altered, spreading once again across the internet. To the FBI, the case is archived and forgotten. To believers, it is prophecy fulfilled. And to everyone else, it is a warning, proof that blind devotion, once awakened, never truly dies. Even now, decades later, some still whisper the same words that began it all. Through the blood, we are made whole.